Good day, fellow citizens. This is another in a series of videos about restoring our nation's first principles. In 1787, as Dr. Benjamin Franklin departed from Independence Hall in Philadelphia after the signing of the U.S. Constitution, a woman approached Franklin. "Well, Dr. Franklin, have you given us a monarchy or a republic?" Franklin replied, "You have a republic, madam, if you can keep it." More than 200 years later, we must honestly ask ourselves, how well have we kept it? Well, we have not kept it very well at all. And today, we face a constitutional crisis. And most of our fellow citizens don't even realize there is a crisis. But the crisis has been with us for some time, getting worse and worse, with very little action to truly reverse the state of affairs. When the President of the United States is sworn into office, he takes an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution, and so does every public official in this land. But these oaths have been violated. These public officials have sworn to protect and defend our Constitution, but many of them have abandoned it. I'm going to talk about one very important principle that has been abandoned by our elected officials: the separation of powers. You may ask, what is that? Well, it has been taught in our schools, but not taught as it should be taught, which is why I'm addressing the issue today. Separation of powers, a principle supported by the framers of our Constitution, says that the separate branches of our national government, legislative, executive, judicial, must use only the powers delegated to them by the Constitution. The separation of powers was put in place so that no one single branch of the federal government could become so powerful that it would threaten the liberty of the citizens. Government is supposed to secure our liberty. The legislative branch, Congress, establishes policy. It makes the laws. The executive branch, the President, and the agencies under the President's authority execute or carry out the laws. The judicial branch, the court system, is supposed to do one thing: rule compliance. That means they read what the law says or what the Constitution says and uphold the laws and the Constitution. They can invalidate laws or declare them unconstitutional. But the legislative branch, Congress, has wrongly delegated much of its power to executive branch agencies instead of establishing policies by passing laws. And these executive branch agencies have then exercised legislative authority and usurped the legislative power by making agency rules and regulations. This is the bureaucracy that afflicts us. We call it the administrative state. Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution begins with, quote, "All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States." It doesn't say legislative powers are vested in executive branch agencies. In modern times, presidents have made many new policies by issuing executive orders, which are supposed to be used to implement the will of Congress, a lawmaking branch. The president is supposed to, quote, "take care that the laws be faithfully executed," as the Constitution says. But in many cases, he makes up laws on his own. And the judges that sit on the courts, especially the Supreme Court, legislate from the bench when they should be doing one thing: ruling compliance. That means measuring what government does against the written text of the law and the Constitution. That is all they are supposed to do. The principle of the separation of powers has been ignored, and our liberty hangs in the balance, ready to be destroyed with the next executive mandate. So who is to blame for this? In the early 1900s, during what is called the Progressive Era, Presidents Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, one a Republican, another a Democrat, wanted an expanded role for the national government. They promoted the idea that federal agencies, staffed with so-called experts, should make rules to solve the problems of society. But there is a problem with that. These experts, these bureaucrats, are not accountable to anyone. They are not elected. Congress was persuaded by the progressive philosophy and passed laws to construct the administrative state. In doing so, members of Congress abandoned the republic that was established by our Constitution and put unaccountable bureaucrats in the place of elected legislators. Congress did this, but Congress can undo it. Yet our Congress has done nothing of any significance to dismantle the administrative state since it began to develop in the 20th century. A good example of so-called progressive solutions is the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. Congress passed laws to establish the EPA and gave it the power to regulate the cleanliness of water and air. EPA powers include rulemaking authority, which is legislative power, the power to impose and enforce rules, which is executive power, and the power to adjudicate or judge on matters involving the rules they make, which is judicial power. There is no separation of powers to protect the liberty of the people in this process, and very little chance for input by most citizens. Liberty is on the chopping block, and the experts, the bureaucrats, make all the decisions with no vote by Congress on the rules and decisions. This process of rulemaking, enforcement, and adjudication is similar for a host of other federal agencies, such as the Federal Communications Commission, the U.S. Department of Education, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. They are all in the rulemaking business because members of Congress won't take the time to make such rules or approve such rules themselves. Collectively, we the people are partly to blame for this mess. Why? Because we are not electing enough men and women to office who will work to restore our Constitution. We elect too many small-minded partisans instead of statesmen. To reverse course, we must start doing our job as citizens. How do we do that? First, we educate ourselves in the principles of our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution, what I call our first principles. Second, we vote for candidates who understand the constitutional crisis we face and will work to restore our Constitution. And we support these candidates and work for their election to public office. Finally, we involve ourselves in and support organizations seeking to educate our fellow citizens and restore our Constitution. James Madison, our fourth president, and considered by many as the father of the Constitution, said this, quote, "A popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power which knowledge gives." End of quote. Fellow citizens, we can make a difference if we educate ourselves and rise up together to replace some of our public officials with better and wiser men and women. If we act together, we can restore our republic. Thank you for listening.